Hey everybody, I'm Chef Tom with atbbq.com, and this is Pozole Rojo. But today we're making a real winter warmer of a soup on a very cold day in Kansas. We're making pozole. Now, if you're not familiar with pozole, it's a Mexican soup or stew that's made from hominy along with some sort of protein, some sort of meat. And in the past, you've seen us do a pozole verde, in which we made a soup with some hominy, some chicken, and a green salsa. Today, we're going the red route. So instead of that green salsa, we'll make a red chili sauce. And we're also going to be utilizing some very thin sliced pork shoulder in our soup. So let's kick things off by making that red chili sauce. Now the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna get a little bit of color onto our white onion. So the onion's going into the red chili sauce. I just wanna get a little bit of char to add some extra depth of flavor. So we're gonna throw these right on the grill grates inside of the Yoder Smoker's YS640S pellet grill. We're running at 500 degrees, completely direct setup. Now for the chilies, we've got some anchos, pasillas, and chile de arbol. And I'll be honest with you, typically I don't use the pasilla, I would use a guajillo, but as I pulled the guajillos out today, I realized they were kind of past their prime, so we're gonna replace those with the pasillas. And just one thing to note when you're looking at your dried chilies, they should still be a bit flexible, not totally brittle. That's ideal. The more brittle they get, the older they are, so that's just kind of a good reference point. In addition to that, we've got some garlic and some Mexican oregano. That combined with our grilled white onion is going to be our sauce. Now with these chilies, I just want to cut into these so that I can remove the stem and the seeds before we get to toasting and rehydrating these. So I'm going to work my way through all of these chilies, well specifically our anchos and our pasillas. The arbol will probably just go in as is. Now in a dry, hot skillet, we're gonna add our chilies and start to toast them just a little bit. This is actually going to start to wake these up, make them a little bit more pliable, open up some of those aromas. Now, these arbol chilies, these are where you're gonna get your heat in this recipe. We've got 5 of them, and this is gonna be probably medium spicy on the pozole, so this is where you control your heat. You want it spicier, add more. You want to kill the spice, don't even use them. So just about 60 seconds on one side. We'll flip these, do the same to the other side, and then we're going to get them covered in water so they can rehydrate. So we want to add enough water to the skillet to cover. I'm going to cover this with the lid and crank the temp up to high. And when this comes to a simmer, I'm going to turn off the heat. So we'll cover it with the cast iron lid, crank the heat all the way up, and then once it hits a simmer, we can turn the heat off and just let them soak for about 15 to 20 minutes until they're pliable once again. So our onions are off the grill now. We're going to get rid of that outermost crispy layer there. We'll leave a little bit of that char behind just for the flavor. And then we'll just give them a rough chop. They're going to go in the blender with everything else. Now for the garlic, we just need these smashed and peeled. We don't have to go any further than that. All right, so all this stuff into the blender. We'll throw our teaspoon of Mexican oregano, and then we're gonna add our chilies. We can see how these are all softened up and rehydrated now. Straight into the blender. I'm gonna grab just a few tablespoons of the water that we rehydrated those chilies in, just to help this move a little bit easier as we process it. Get a little taste here. Oh yeah, super earthy. Great garlic flavor coming through, nice bit of heat, no salt or anything like that going on yet. You can definitely taste the oregano as well. So this is going to be a great flavor base that's going into the broth along with a protein in the hominy. So now we're moving on to our pork, and this is about half, maybe a third of a Boston butt pork shoulder, the boneless end. That's the money muscle there. And we're going to be using this in our soup today. But what we want to do is we want to get it sliced pretty thin because we're going to grill this off just to get some char on it before we actually stick it into the soup. So I'm going to cut this just as thin as I can. About 1/2 inch would be great. And this stuff is really cold right now. In fact, I didn't even let it thaw all the way. We're almost to thawed now. it won't matter once we get it off the grill. Any center bit that's still a bit frozen is going to be warmed through, and then it'll finish breaking down as it braises in the soup. So now we've got 3 pounds of pork laid out. This is ready to be seasoned, which we're going to season today with the Cattleman's Grill 8-second ride carne asada seasoning, which is very chili forward. It's got some garlic and a little bit of salt in it as well. Just hit it with a little bit of binder first, be it fat or hot sauce or whatever you've got on hand. Get that worked into the meat. We'll flip it and season the other side and head over to the grill. All right, back to the 640 now. Pork's going right on the grill grates over the direct flame. The great thing about this is we don't have to worry about these like being all the way cooked down. I mean, we're gonna get some crisp on them, and then we're gonna braise them in that soup until they're really tender. So for now, we're really just looking to get some color. It's about 5 minutes, starting to get some good color on here. At least these ones directly over the flame, and that's all right if they don't cook in the same amount of time. We'll turn the rest as needed. Yeah, the ones over direct flame are looking really nice now. So let's do a little rotation. Some of these with a little bit more color on them can go out to the outsides. That fat from the pork shoulder does a great job of creating some flame that gets us a little bit more color. And you get all that flavor that flares back up into the meat. Now we're getting the kind of color that we're looking for. We're ready to pull these off. So the pork, we're going to give a chop now. Right next to me here, you can see I sliced up a white onion. Just sliced thin, that's also going to go into our pozole. So this Dutch oven's been preheating here in the grill for 5 minutes or so. I'm gonna add a couple tablespoons of vegetable oil and then our red chili sauce. We're just gonna cook this down a little bit in the sauce before we add in the rest of our ingredients. So much like we toasted off those chilies before we blended them, now we're kind of just cooking this through any rawness out of the onion, out of the garlic, start to warm up all those flavors and aromas out of the chilies. We'll close this up and let that cook for just a little bit. The sauce has been simmering away for about 10 minutes now. We're gonna add in our chopped pork, as well as our white onion. Give this a turn to get it all coated. And then we're going to add in our hominy. This hominy is a corn product, if you're not familiar with it. It's really what gives the pozole its definitive flavor, in my opinion. I've got 2 cans that I've rinsed. That corn flavor is going to work its way into the broth as this all simmers away. And speaking of which, we're going to add now a couple quarts of vegetable stock. I'm going to say you're going to need 2 to 3 quarts of stock for this process. See, 2 gets it covered initially, but just depending on the consistency that you want, a little soupier or a little thicker, you're going to add more along the way. For now, this is fine just the way it is. I'm going to push this directly over the flame here. It's going to come up to a simmer, and we're just going to cook this until all that pork is tender, the onions, all of that stuff. We'll be back to check on it here in about half an hour. Now, just until this comes up to a simmer, I'm going to throw a lid on it. So maybe we'll be back before a half hour because I want to make sure that we really get this thing rolling. We're about 30 minutes into the cook now. Took the lid off around 15 minutes when it came up to a simmer. You can see how much that consistency has changed already. That broth is formed, it's mixing with the red chili sauce, and the hominy starts to kind of thicken things up as well. I can feel that our pork's maybe not quite as tender as I want it to be yet, so we're gonna let this ride, check back on it in another 20 minutes or so. Well, our Pozole Rojo's been simmering away for a full hour now. I did add a whole nother quart of vegetable stock as it started to reduce down, but I feel good about this consistency and where it's at. I forgot to mention it earlier, so I'll tell you guys now. We need about a tablespoon of our Cattleman's Grill Mexicano in here. And that Mexicano is not going to give us all of the salt that we need, but it will give us some cumin, some garlic, a little bit of salt. We just want to give that a few minutes to kind of work its way into this broth we've created. Probably should have done it a long time ago, but slipped my mind. So we're going to go ahead and pull this off here. Let it sit for a few minutes before we serve it up. All right, we're going to do a quick taste for salt because I feel like we're going to need some. Oh, man. So earthy. Great chili flavor. I'm catching some of that smokiness out of the grilled pork. The mouthfeel is just incredible. That broth has really turned into something special, but it does need a bit of salt. So we're gonna add just a little bit of our hickory smoked salt. Really not much salt in this recipe up to this point. So we'll let that dissolve in and get these plated up with some of our garnishes. Not going to load these up too full because we do have some garnish to add to the top. So the first thing I want to do is hit this with some lime juice, because one of the things that we have going on here for sure is that earthy, savory thing, but we need a little bit of acidity kind of break that up. The other thing is we're going to add some texture in the form of green cabbage and with some radishes. We're going to add a little bit of cotija cheese on top, a salty, funky, crumbly cheese. And finally, a little bit of cilantro. All right, one more bite with it all together now. I want to get some of that texture in there, some of that cheese. Oh my gosh, guys. The way that lime juice balances things out is incredible. We've elevated that salt level just to the right spot. But everything else is so creamy and earthy, really well balanced. Spicy, but not too spicy. And that pork just falls apart in your mouth. It's a cold day. I'm feeling much warmer. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to check out atbbq.com for all the products featured in today's video. If you enjoyed the recipe, hit that subscribe button. And if you have any questions or comments or there's anything you'd like to see me cook, let me know in the comment section down below, and let's be good to one another. For more recipes, tips, and techniques, head over to atbbq.com/thesauce. All things barbecue, where barbecue legends are made.